Sarah Miller stood in the center of her engagement party, smiling politely as 60 guests watched her father raise his glass. Her father, Mark Miller, grinned widely and said, "To my daughter who finally found a man desperate enough." The room froze so quickly that Sarah heard someone gasp 3 tables away. Her fiancé, Adam, clenched his fist under the table as if ready to stand, but Sarah touched his arm and whispered, "Not now, please." She didn't scream or cry. She simply rose from her seat with a calmness she didn't fully understand. In that moment, something inside her shifted like a door unlocking from the inside. She walked toward the front of the room where her laptop bag was placed under the projector table. Every step felt heavy, like she was carrying 29 years of swallowed pain in her heels. Behind her, Mark asked sharply, "Sarah, what do you think you're doing?" But she didn't turn around. She plugged the HDMI cable into her laptop with steady hands even though her heart was racing. "I think everyone here deserves to know who you really are," she said softly. The projector screen lit up with a document her father never expected to see in public. 3 months earlier, Sarah had discovered something in her father's company books that made her blood run cold. She was working late at her forensic accounting job when she traced a chain of payments through several shell companies. One of those companies quietly connected back to her father's construction firm. No, this can't be him," she whispered as she stared at the spreadsheets. But the numbers didn't lie and neither did the dates. When she finally looked at the full picture, she realized her father had been stealing from his business partner, John Harris, for nearly 10 years. That night, Sarah drove home and sat in her car with the engine off, gripping the steering wheel while her breath shook in the cold air. She wanted to believe she misunderstood the data, but her training told her otherwise. Later, at the kitchen table, she showed the evidence to her boyfriend, Adam. "How much did he take?" Adam asked quietly as he studied the pages. "Hundreds of thousands," she whispered, unable to lift her eyes. Adam reached across the table and said, "Whatever you decide, I'm with you, but John deserves to know." Sarah didn't plan to reveal anything at the engagement party. Her plan was simple. Finish her report, attend the party peacefully, then meet John on Monday morning to tell him privately. But her father had turned the party into a stage built for his ego, inviting more than 60 people and rearranging the seating so Sarah's friends sat near the kitchen while his business contacts filled the front. When she complained, he said, "Stop being selfish, Sarah. This is a networking opportunity." Adam watched her hang up the phone, his jaw tight with frustration. "He's not celebrating you," Adam said softly. "He's performing, and he needs an audience." The night before the party, Sarah went to her parents' house to drop off the seating chart, hoping the tension would settle. She found her father in his study, writing something on a yellow pad with his glasses low on his nose. "Dad, what are you working on?" she asked gently. Without looking up, he replied, "Pie toast. Don't worry about it." When she asked if she could read it, he finally looked at her and smiled a cold smile that didn't reach his eyes. "You'll hear it tomorrow with everyone else, Sarah," he said, and something uneasy slid through her chest like ice. Her mother stepped into the doorway holding a cup of tea and quickly tried to smooth the air. "Your father always gives wonderful speeches," she said with that trained softness she used whenever she wanted Sarah to stay quiet. Sarah remembered another speech he gave years ago at her uncle's retirement dinner. He had made a joke that cut so sharply it left her uncle's wife in tears, yet everyone laughed because that was what people did around Mark Miller. Sarah left the study without arguing, feeling a pressure building behind her ribs. She didn't know yet that her father's toast had been written like a trap. On the morning of the party, Sarah sat at her kitchen table reviewing the final guest list sent by the event coordinator. Her eyebrows lifted when she saw that her father had added 2 more people to table 1. John and Mary Harris, his business partner and wife. Meanwhile, her friends were pushed all the way to table 8 near the kitchen doors. She called her father immediately and asked, "Dad, why are John and Mary sitting in the front while my friends are shoved to the back?" His voice sharpened. "Because this is a professional gathering, Sarah. Don't start your nonsense today." Sarah hung up with her hands shaking and Adam watched her quietly. Adam walked over and placed a hand on her shoulder. "You know why he did that, right?" he said softly. Sarah looked at him with tired eyes. "Tell me." Adam sighed and replied, "Because he's performing. He wants John to see a perfect family. He's using you to sell a lie he built." Sarah closed her laptop slowly and whispered, "I'm just a prop in his show." Adam kissed her forehead and said, "Not tonight, you aren't." When they arrived at the venue, Sarah immediately recognized the space as her father's favorite kind of stage: exposed brick walls, polished floors, expensive lighting, and a projector ready for his carefully curated slideshow. She walked around adjusting centerpieces when she suddenly heard her father's voice from the hallway. She stepped closer and realized he was speaking to John Harris. "I'm so proud of my little girl," her father said warmly, using a tone he had never used toward her privately. John laughed and replied, "You raised her well, Mark." Sarah stood behind the wall frozen, hearing her father speak words he had never said to her face. In that moment she understood that his pride only existed when it could buy him something. Sarah walked away from the hallway quietly, placing the centerpiece down with trembling fingers. Her father's voice still echoed in her ears, especially the word proud, a word he had never given her without an audience. She didn't confront him or cry. She simply stored the moment the way she stored every hurt he caused, deep inside where pain settled like old furniture. What she didn't know was that John Harris, the man her father praised so easily, was the same man being stolen from in her report. She took a slow breath and whispered to herself, "This can't go on." And in that moment, a small flame lit inside her. A flame she wouldn't recognize until the night exploded. 3 months earlier she had created a folder on her laptop named Project Sunrise. This was the folder holding all the evidence she traced after discovering the shell companies. Night after night she typed until her eyes burned, following transfers, recording dates, and building an audit report with the precision she was trained for. "How could you do this, Dad?" she whispered to an empty room more than once. But the numbers never changed, no matter how long she stared at them. Each transaction was another crack in the image of the father she used to defend. 2 weeks into her investigation, Sarah finally showed the evidence to Adam because she could no longer hold the weight alone. She placed the papers in front of him and watched as he read them carefully. After a long moment he asked, This is serious, Sarah. What are you going to do?" She shook her head slowly and whispered, "I don't know. He's my father." Adam leaned forward, touched her hand and said, "He may be your father, but he's stealing from a man who trusts him. That deserves the truth." Sarah decided she would finish the full report, attend the engagement party, then meet John on Monday morning in private. Her plan was calm, clean, and professional, exactly the way she handled every case. She had no intention of ruining the party or confronting her father publicly. She simply wanted to do what was right. Adam agreed and said, "Monday is soon enough. You don't owe him a scene." But sometimes life rearranges the plans we build so neatly, and Sarah had no idea what was waiting for her at the party. When the party began, everything looked perfect on the surface. Guests laughed and clinked glasses while soft music floated through the room. Her father moved from table to table, shaking hands and showing off the slideshow he prepared with photos he approved of. "Smile, Sarah," he called across the room, waving for her to stand beside Adam for a picture. She forced a smile that felt stiff on her face. Adam leaned close and whispered, "Just breathe. Tonight won't end the way he thinks." Dinner began at 7:15, and Sarah sat across from her parents, with Adam beside her like a quiet shield. Her father dominated the table effortlessly, telling story after story about her childhood, only choosing the ones that made her look foolish. "Did I ever tell you about the time Sarah failed her driving test 3 times? He announced loudly, raising 3 fingers for emphasis. The table laughed politely, even those who didn't know her. Her mother laughed too, eyes down, hands folded tightly. Sarah kept her smile frozen while Adam squeezed her hand under the table, reminding her she wasn't alone. Her father leaned in closer to the group and continued, "And the cooking, oh, don't get me started. She almost burned the kitchen down making scrambled eggs." More laughter followed, echoing through the expensive venue. Sarah looked around and noticed Mary Harris watching her with soft concern. Mary whispered to her husband, "He's being a bit hard on her, isn't he?" Her mother quickly answered, "Oh, that's just how he shows love," a line she had recited for years without thinking. Sarah swallowed hard, realizing the old pattern was performing itself again in front of people who finally saw it. At 8:15, after dessert plates were cleared, her father tapped his champagne glass 3 times. The room quieted instantly, trained by years of his commanding presence. "I want to raise a toast to my daughter," he said, pausing as if preparing something heartfelt. For a brief moment, Sarah felt a foolish spark of hope rise in her chest. But then he smiled proudly and said, "For 29 years I've watched this girl struggle. With school, with work, with every relationship that failed." The words hit her like a slap, and Adam's entire body tightened beside her. Her father raised his glass and delivered the line he had crafted all week. "So tonight I want to toast Sarah, who finally found a man desperate enough." The room fell silent, dead silent, the kind where breath stalls in midair. No laughter followed, no murmurs, not even the polite chuckles he expected. A woman at table 4 covered her mouth in shock. Adam started to stand, fury in his eyes, but Sarah touched his arm firmly and whispered, "Don't. I've got this." And in that exact moment she stopped being afraid. Sarah stood slowly, her face calm in a way that made the entire room lean forward. She looked directly at her father and said quietly, "Sit down, Dad." The simple command stunned him into silence. He tried to laugh it off, saying, "Sarah, don't be dramatic," but she repeated, "Sit down." And for the first time in her life, Mark Miller obeyed her. She pushed her chair back, walked toward the front of the room and reached for her laptop, finally stepping into a truth she could no longer ignore. Sarah reached the AV table where her laptop bag lay hidden beneath a stack of extra napkins. Her hands were steady now, steadier than they had been in months. She unzipped the bag and opened the laptop as the room watched in stunned silence. Behind her, her father's voice sharpened, "Sarah, what do you think you're doing?" But she still didn't turn around. She plugged the HDMI cable into the projector and waited for the screen to light up. When it did, the first page of her report glowed across the entire room like a truth refusing to stay buried. She turned around and faced everyone, her voice calm and professional. "My father just told 60 people that no man would willingly marry me. So I think it's fair you all know who he really is." A ripple of whispers moved through the tables as she clicked to the next page. Numbers, dates, wire transfers. Clean evidence, impossible to deny. Adam moved 3 steps behind her, offering silent support. Mary and John Harris leaned forward, their eyes narrowing as they recognized their company's name on the screen. Her father shot to his feet, knocking his chair back with a sharp scrape that made someone flinch. "This is ridiculous," he shouted, his public mask cracking in front of everyone. "You don't know what you're talking about." Sarah met his eyes for the first time without fear. "Dad, I'm a certified fraud examiner. This is exactly what I'm trained to do." The room absorbed her words with heavy silence, and no one dared defend him. John Harris stared at the screen, his champagne glass slipping from his hand and shattering on the floor. The sound cut through the silence like a warning bell. Mary grabbed his arm, whispering, "John, are you okay?" But he didn't answer. He looked at Mark the way a man looks at someone he has misjudged for too many years. His voice trembled as he finally said, "Mark, what did you do?" Mark tried to step toward him, palms raised, but John lifted a hand sharply. "Don't." John reached for his phone and dialed a number with slow, controlled anger. "Ray, it's John. I need you at the office first thing Monday morning. It's about the partnership." He hung up without looking at Mark again. Chairs began scraping quietly as guests started rising, unsure whether to stay or leave. Adam stepped beside Sarah, placing a steady hand between her shoulders. The room had shifted completely, and everyone knew nothing would return to the way it was before. Mark turned toward his wife, Linda, desperation spreading across his face as the room continued to shift away from him. "Linda, tell them she's lying. Tell them she's making this up," he demanded, his voice cracking in a way Sarah had never heard before. Linda stared down at her napkin, fingers trembling softly. For the first time in 30 years she did not rush to protect him. Her silence rang louder than any sentence she could have spoken. Mark looked around for someone, anyone, to defend him, but no one met his eyes. Guests began collecting their purses and coats, moving quietly toward the exit. No dramatic shouting, no chaos, just a slow, steady withdrawal like the tide pulling away from the shore. Sarah stood still at the front of the room, watching the life her father built unravel in front of 60 witnesses. Adam whispered, "You did what needed to be done," but she only nodded, unsure whether she felt victory or heartbreak. Mary Harris approached Sarah gently and said, "Thank you for telling the truth. I know what it must have cost you." Sarah swallowed hard, unable to speak through the tightness in her throat. John Harris walked toward Mark, each step controlled and heavy with disbelief. 15 years, Mark, he said quietly, staring at the man he once called friend. 15 years I trusted you. Mark opened his mouth to explain, but John lifted a finger sharply. No more lies. No more excuses. He straightened his jacket and added, my lawyer will contact you Monday. Do not call me. Then he turned and walked out with Mary beside him, leaving Mark frozen in the center of the room. By the time the clock reached 9, the venue was nearly empty, just a few staff members clearing untouched plates and dimming the lights. Sarah packed her laptop into her bag with trembling hands as the adrenaline faded. She walked toward her father, who stood alone by the bar, clutching a glass he wasn't drinking. His eyes were red, but Sarah couldn't tell if it was anger or something deeper. You destroyed your own father tonight, he said in a broken voice. Sarah met his gaze and replied softly, no, Dad. You destroyed yourself. I only stopped hiding it. Mark turned to Linda one last time, hoping for rescue. Linda, are you really going to let her do this to me? He pleaded. Linda lifted her eyes slowly, and for the first time in their marriage she spoke without fear. You did this, Mark. Not her. The words hit him harder than anything Sarah had said. His face fell blank as if he didn't recognize the woman speaking to him. Sarah walked toward the exit where Adam waited with her coat, and together they stepped into the cold night air, leaving the wreckage behind them. Monday arrived faster than Sarah expected, and the world around her father began collapsing with frightening speed. John Harris and his attorney appeared at the company office before sunrise with a court order for a full independent audit. Mark was removed from all financial access by noon. Sarah didn't celebrate. She simply sat in her kitchen holding a warm mug she barely tasted. Adam touched her knee gently and asked, "You okay?" She whispered, "It doesn't feel good, but it feels right." The independent audit confirmed everything Sarah had uncovered. Over $800,000 diverted through shell accounts across 10 years. Contracts were frozen, clients pulled away, and the business that once carried Mark's pride began to crumble. Sarah heard the news in pieces, mostly through co-workers who knew her profession but not her connection. "Are you sure you don't want updates?" Adam asked as he cooked dinner beside her. Sarah shook her head slowly. "No. The numbers are enough. I already lived the rest." Her mother called one Sunday afternoon, sounding softer than Sarah had ever heard her. "Sarah, I should have protected you. I'm so sorry," she said with a fragile honesty that made Sarah grip the phone tighter. They talked slowly, carefully, as if walking across thin ice. Her mother admitted she had started therapy after the party, wanting to understand how fear shaped her choices. Sarah felt tears rise, but she steadied her voice. "I love you, Mom, but I need to see the change, not just hear it." Linda whispered, "I understand. And I will try." 2 days later, Sarah received a final text from her father. It read, "You chose a stranger over your own blood." She read it twice, feeling the familiar pull of guilt, but the hold was weaker this time, almost gone. She placed the phone face down on the table and whispered, "No, Dad. I finally chose myself." Adam came over, wrapped his arms around her shoulders and said, "You don't owe him anything anymore." She nodded, letting the truth settle inside her like a quiet sunrise. 6 months after the party, Sarah and Adam hosted a small celebration in Adam's parents' backyard. Just 15 people. Friends who loved them, family who chose healing, and neighbors who came with warm smiles. There were no speeches written on yellow pads, no staged photos, no heavy expectations. Adam's mother hugged Sarah and said, "You're safe now, sweetheart," and the words wrapped around her like soft light. Her mother arrived carrying a homemade dish, a sign of effort, a sign of trying. Sarah welcomed her with a gentle smile, letting the moment land softly between them. As the evening continued, a delivery arrived. A bouquet of white flowers with a card from John and Mary. "To Sarah, the most honest person we know. Congratulations." Sarah held the card for a long moment, feeling a warmth she had chased her entire life but had never received from her father. Adam came to her side and whispered, "Some people build, some people take." Sarah nodded, tears gathering softly. She looked around at the small circle of people who actually wanted to be there and felt something she had never felt before. Peace. And in that quiet backyard under string lights, she finally understood. The truth didn't break her life, it freed it.